It's The World This Week, 7 days, 4 Paris-based correspondents, 1 hour. The World This Week in partnership with The Daily Beast. Joining us, documentary filmmaker Tanya Rachmanova. We'll be talking about one of your projects later. How are you?
Fine. Nice to be back from London.
Welcome back. Welcome back to Judah Grunstein, editor-in-chief of World Politics Review. We're also in the company of Craig Kapitas, editor-at-large at TRT World, and she cracks the whip on the second floor. France24.com senior editor, Lila Jacinto. The World This Week on Facebook and Twitter, hashtag World This Week. He spent nearly 7 years holed up inside the Ecuadorian embassy in London. WikiLeaks founder Julian Assange, now aged 47, dragged away after the lifting of his immunity. By the end of Thursday, he'd been charged for skipping bail in London. The plaintiff in the sexual assault case in Sweden that had been dropped on a technicality, asking for the case to be reopened. And yes, federal authorities in the United States unsealing an indictment against the Australian over Chelsea Manning's data dump of classified Defense and State Department cables. Judah Grunstein, the reaction, from the reaction, we can already suss that this isn't the end, this is the beginning of a very long process.
Well, I'd say it's the end and the beginning. One of the things that struck me is that it's the end of a very long cycle in terms of our experience with the internet, with information on the internet, with the questions of transparency, accountability, hacking, and the way in which the initial hopes and aspirations and expectations that people had very quickly changed. And the narrative is so very different now on a lot of these things. States got into the act. There was a lot of blowback. It's the beginning in the sense that, to begin with, there will be the trial. It will be interesting to see if the U.S. government limits the charges to what have been revealed, which have to do with.
Hang on, you're assuming he's going to be extradited to the United States.
Oh, I imagine so. I mean, it's my assumption. I mean, that's the game plan for the United States government. But just to finish the thought, it would be, if he does end up on trial, it will be interesting to see if they limit the charges to theft and to aiding and abetting and conspiracy, or if they expand the charges to the publishing of the material, which could get into some murky gray areas in terms of journalism and the need to have muckraking journalism and accountability journalism. The second thing that will be interesting to watch.
That's one of the questions. Is what he did journalism? Those data dumps?
No, I would argue not at all. There's a difference between making available and, for instance, explaining. There's a difference between targeting in partisan ways and doing things for the public interest. He very clearly, over the course of time, also evolved into an enemy of the United States government. He protected other governments, for instance, Russia, we know. But just one last thought is that we also know that he has he kept things back to protect himself. And already on Twitter, WikiLeaks released a post that was somewhat cryptic, but it looked like a decryption key. So the idea being that he has certain blackmail material that he can use against whoever it is he feels he needs to in the event he was arrested and taken out of the embassy.
Didn't always help his own cause, though, Tanya Rachmanova, when he, for instance, helped instigate these leaks regarding Ecuador's current president.
Well, it's an interesting question. I mean, and I think I totally agree with you that during the 7 years the situation is evaluated, and that was at the beginning. We believed that he did help a lot. I mean, yes and no, because you can, yes, okay, you help, but by which means you are doing it, and if you do it for everyone, is it the open information and it's for everyone, or you are manipulating it a little? When you serve certain countries, it's a different story, and so in some way, I think, I mean, I'm not here to judge if you should be extradited or not, but that some kind of trial or something should take place. Otherwise, it's suspended like.
And some people saying that a trial is just what Julian Assange wants to a certain degree.
Well, he does not want to be extradited to the U.S., and I would say that the UK justice system, the entire extradition process, will be done in a fair manner, because the UK judiciary.
The opposition
will
leader
handle
has
that.
said he doesn't want to see, the Labour Party says it doesn't want to see him extradited. So if Jeremy Corbyn comes to power, what happens then?
Right, but the politicians don't influence the British justice. This is and the UK and the US, they have established conventions of his extradition request. I mean, one of the things that you said about him dumping leaks about the former Ecuadorian president. Look.
The current one.
Current
The current one, right? Because Korea was the one who gave him. Not really asylum, but you gave him shelter in the embassy. Is that what's made him a difficult character is not so much the information that he put out, which could be argued for the public good, but his illiberal streak. That, however, that has nothing to do with his case. But if indeed, and I seriously doubt that the U.S. would push it further into publishing the material that he released, because frankly, the argument that of the security interests that his leaks. The security interests that were at stake did not really come into play. I mean, there was no, the sort of leaks that he did on the Afghanistan war, the Iraq war, we didn't really see any grave security breaches because of that. It did increase the knowledge of what was happening.
All right, we did hear claims to that end. WikiLeaks became a go-to reference for Donald Trump's campaign at the time when he was running for president in 2016. He referenced the site in attacking Hillary Clinton. Of course, that was then. This is now.
Do you still love WikiLeaks?
I know nothing about WikiLeaks. It's not my thing. And I know there is something having to do with Julian Assange. I've been seeing what's happened with Assange, and that will be a determination, I would imagine, mostly by the Attorney General, who's doing an excellent job. So he'll be making a determination. I know nothing really about him. It's not my deal in life.
Not his deal in life, Craig Kapitas.
As you know, I do not discuss Donald Trump on this program unless we have a board-certified psychiatrist from the American Medical Association on the panel, which I believe we do not this evening. Look, I hesitate to compare Julian Assange to a bucket of spit because it would be insulting to the bucket of spit. The point is, I support him 100%. I don't like him. He doesn't look like us. He's not what you would call a card-carrying journalist in the normal way. As I remember years ago when I worked for Rolling Stone, I was not a card-carrying journalist in a normal way. And I'm reminded of a fellow by the name of Larry Flynt, who was the publisher of Hustler magazine, which was the most grotesque pornographic magazine of its time out of Ohio. It was so awful to women that Flint was shot and crippled and put in a wheelchair. A lot of people applauded that. Flint was a horrible man. I interviewed him. I knew him actually quite well. Awful piece of work. But you know what? We had to support him because the moment the United States government attempts to shut down someone like Larry Flynt or Julian Assange, I don't care what the charges are, that gives the government an opening to go in and hurt the First Amendment. There will be a trickle down on the First Amendment. That's where it starts.
The right of free speech.
Exactly. And I do not like absolutists. To have an absolute thought, to be that tight, to be that hardcore I always thought was a negative thing. But on the U.S. Constitution, First Amendment issue, I am an absolutist.
And on the hashtag world this week, one reaction, the Assange arrest is concerning for any news outlet because it sets a dangerous precedent that could be used to prosecute journalists for working with their sources. We need to be ready.
But I disagree. And I think that what Julian Assange does resembles journalism. It overlaps in a lot of ways. But the differences, to me, are where he left himself vulnerable to begin with. A journalist who's working with a source, and especially a whistleblowing source, will never encourage the source to break the law. That's something a journalist is trained not to do. Julian Assange not only
What's encouragement?
Let me finish.
What's
Julian
encouragement?
Assange not only encouraged Chelsea Manning to go further, offered to help break a code that she needed in terms of getting through an encrypted password. That's not what a journalist would do. A journalist also would not target their investigations simply to do damage to one side and not another. And I think that there certainly are areas of concern that certainly the journalism profession, First Amendment watchdogs, and advocates need to be very vocal about it. But for now, from what I've seen in terms of the charges are strictly limited to.
But there will be
aiding,
more. There will be
we'll
more.
see.
There will be
That's
more.
Why I
Judah,
said,
I'm going to tell you
very
why. I'm going to
curious
tell you
see
why I
whether
don't
they
buy
do
it.
and why I wouldn't want to see them do it. Because as they're formulated, they're very precisely formulated not to get into that.
There's a
gray
precisely formulated one charge, and I appreciate your position, but I beg to disagree with you on this. And the reason I disagree with this is I can remember when I was 18 years old and working for the Alternative Press Syndicate, which served a number of newspapers like the Village Voice and all kinds of so-called underground newspapers of that era. And I was told the same thing. The people who work, the journalists who work for the underground press, the Voice, the East Village Other, the Berkeley Barb, I can go down a long list. They were told the same thing. You are not a journalist. And you know what? We were.
But did you encourage people to break the law?
What does that mean? And did I encourage sources? Have I encouraged sources to do everything in their power to get me the information which they say they're going to provide? Yes. And any journalist who works that kind of beat, as I have for years, that says they haven't done that, I think is telling a porky pie.
There's a reason, though. There's a reason why the First Amendment doesn't say journalists have freedom of speech. Everyone has freedom of speech. And that's because, honestly, try defining what is a journalist and what isn't a journalist. It's an incredibly difficult exercise, simply because, for instance, is a propagandist a journalist? Is Sean Hannity a journalist? These are questions that would be difficult to answer.
That's an administrative question.
Again, but the point is that the First Amendment protects speech
by
everyone. So if they in any way try to go after Assange for speech, then on that measure, not only is it an affront to journalists, but it's an affront to free speech. If, however, they limit the charges to the technical charge of aiding and abetting and encouraging a crime, personally, from an American perspective, and I'm not gung-ho, I'm not a patriot, I don't look for vengeance or revenge or anything, but strictly from the logic of power and statecraft, if you have an enemy of your state that's coming after you the way Assange has come after the United States, it makes perfect sense for the United States to fight back. It makes perfect sense, and he couldn't have expected anything different if they don't bleed it over into free speech.
It's not just human rights lawyers, by the way, and press freedom advocates who've been speaking out in favor of Assange.
This case has already made it into history as a violation of a journalist's rights and his freedom of speech. It is a quintessential example, and without a doubt, we will bring it to the attention of international organizations.
Tanya Rachmanova, your thoughts on where the argument is going, because there are it seems two arguments going on at the same time. There's the argument over Assange and what he's done at WikiLeaks, and then there's the argument over the 2016 U.S. election and whether Russia meddled in it.
Well, this is it's not the same. It's not the same. I mean, with Assange. I'm a little bit skeptical, probably because of my my country of origin, about all these documents coming out of these unknown sources. You have to be able to check these documents because you not always know, because you have to cross. And
in the 7 years since in the 7 years since Assange was inside the Ecuadorian embassy, when we had, for instance, the Panama Papers, when we had LuxLeaks, journalists vetted the information before putting it out there.
Well, then it's journalists, but just putting directly information, this is probably... Well, but I agree that to the journalist or not journalist, it's a different thing.
excuse me, sir. Lest we forget that WikiLeaks / Julian Assange went into journalistic agreements with The Guardian, The New York Times. Le Monde. Need I go on? I do not like Julian Assange's tactics. He's not someone you'd invite over to your house. Okay? But we have to support what he's doing. We might not like WikiLeaks, but in the modern digital age, WikiLeaks is a publication, whether we like it or not. You let them crack that, the U.S. government, there's going to be trickle down. And I'm going to bet you a bottle of your favorite whiskey, my dear friend, that there's going to be more than one charge. In fact, I'll say there'll be multiple charges once they get him back on U.S. soil.
All right, we're going to pick up when we come back and take a look at what's been a busy week elsewhere, a new Brexit deadline.